An amber sun hovers over a gentle surf. A bird stands alone on a smooth, sandy beach. Words appear. Gulf Island's national seashore. Stories of survival. Waves churn in the golden twilight. A wading bird ambles past snags of driftwood.
On a beach in the Gulf Islands, they emerge.
A small turtle pulls itself from under the sand, a layer of which clings to his head and flippers. Other turtles emerge.
Tiny loggerhead sea turtles, a new generation in an age-old cycle of life.
The turtles crawl across the sand.
57 days earlier, a 250-pound female swam to shore and buried more than 70 golf ball-size eggs into the sand.
The turtles push through the sand with their flippers.
Now, these hatchlings are taking their first steps toward survival. Their instincts lead them toward the Gulf of Mexico. But this 100-yard dash is loaded with danger.
A crab emerges. Words appear. Mark Nicholas.
Everything that's out there wants to eat them, from the ghost crabs that are here right on the beach to the seagulls that are flying around. And once they're in that water, then every fish that's out there swimming around, we'll go ahead and take them.
Across the smooth expanse of sand, the tiny turtles crawl toward the surf.
This baby loggerhead treads on one of the last vestiges of undeveloped shorelines in America. 7 barrier islands, born of sea and sand, sculpted by wind.
Words appear. Voice of Mike Amond.
When you get out onto the island in the morning and you'll see a sunrise and you're the only one out on the beach like that, it's got a primeval kind of a feel to it, like you're the first person on Earth.
A white egret with a slender neck stands in the tall grass. An osprey perches on a limb as an alligator meanders through a marsh. Distant trees are silhouetted against the sky. Words appear. Voice of Gail Bishop.
I have all kinds of superlatives for these special islands, but they are part of the bigger system, the Gulf Islands National Seashore, and of course the park is the largest national seashore in the United States.
Like a string of pearls, the Gulf Islands stretch for 160 miles from the Mississippi coast eastward to the Florida Panhandle. Santa Rosa Island and Perdido Key hug the coast near Pensacola. Along the Mississippi coast is a bayou and 5 more islands further offshore. Gulf Island's national seashore is a triumph of natural and human history. Monuments of sand,
Gentle waves break onto a beach.
and of brick.
A fortress stands in a dry moat.
There are many other parks that have forts, but none of them have at least one example of every major type of seacoast defense construction that was ever built in this country, all out in one compact area.
A cannon stands atop the fort wall. A wading bird walks on a beach.
It is indeed a place of solitude,
White clouds billow over the beach.
but it is also a place of brutal extremes. Blistering heat, bone-chilling cold, relentless winds, blowing sand, thundering surf. Humidity that makes the air feel thick enough to slice. Ferocious storms. And despite being surrounded by sea, a place where every drop of fresh water is precious. On the Gulf Islands, if you cannot adapt, you cannot survive.
J. Earl Bowden.
Survival would be a good theme for understanding the nature of the environment that you're in when you visit Gulf Islands. You see man-made environments withstanding storms. You see nature regenerating itself.
Crabs skitter on the beach.
It takes a special kind of plant or animal to live here. Take the ghost crab.
The crab has stout claws and protruding eye stalks.
They live in the little burrows that you find out on the beach. They've got the stalked eyes on top of their head. They've got hairs along their legs, which are kind of like taste buds.
A crab scratches its eye with its mouth parts. Other crabs forage near the surf.
They may look like they came straight out of a cartoon, but the ghost crabs play a crucial role in the survival of these islands. They're scavengers, cleaning up the beaches, recycling the nutrients in the sand.
A crab emerges from a burrow. Another dashes off as a wave sweeps in.
The ghost crabs are a small but important part of the natural landscape known as a barrier island. Thin strips of sand buffer the coast from the sea. For a barrier island, the only constant is change.
Tall trees, some bare, stand silhouetted against the cloudy sky.
The formation of mountains and glaciers occurs over eons. But at the Gulf Islands, you're able to witness geological processes in action.
Waves crash on shore. Words appear. Voice of Mike Amond.
One day, a sand dune can be there, and the next day, it can be completely gone. So it's constantly moving under the force of the wind and the waves. These forces can change things overnight.
A full moon shines in the dark night sky. A dead tree lies on the beach.
There is another kind of change happening here, one that is crucial to understanding what the Gulf Islands are all about.
Words appear. Voice of Gary Hopkins.
Our islands are slowly moving from the east to the west, and you can't see those changes as dramatically. But over the years, you can look at maps and charts and see that the islands have changed.
Looking for some proof that the islands actually move? Well, you don't have to look any further than Petty Boy Island, 10 miles off the mainland from Pascagoula. Maps from 1848 show that Petty Boy was actually a remnant of Dolphin Island in Alabama. During the next 150 years, Petty Boy would drift westward more than 7 miles, and it continues to move westward.
Clouds sail above an empty beach.
How Petty Boy and the rest of these barrier islands came to be is a bit of a mystery. But we think they were formed thousands of years ago when sea levels began to dramatically drop. At the same time, quartz crystals eroded from the granite of the Appalachian Mountains. Ocean-bound streams carried the crystals into larger rivers. Eventually, the rivers deposited the crystal particles in the Gulf of Mexico, providing the raw materials for the sparkling sand beaches we all love today.
Beachgoers at the surf.
The wind and water took it from there, sculpting the sand into magnificent dunes.
Clumps of tall grass grow from the sand.
We wouldn't have these dunes were it not for one tenacious plant. Sea oats are the true pioneers of the Gulf Islands, the crucial thread weaving sand into dunes.
Amanda Kerrigan Grissom.
That plant is so strong, and it helps the island to survive by holding on to the sand. The root system of a sea oat goes down and it spreads out and it holds on to the sand.
Without these pioneers of the plant world, the islands would be nothing more than a sandbar that would eventually disappear into the Gulf.
Words appear. Rick Clark.
The sea oats really are the very fabric and essence for the dynamics and the ecology of the island. They really are the nurture of the island and give rise to a lot of diverse habitat and a lot of different species of wildlife that in turn are dependent upon them.
Sea oats waft in the breeze.
The sea oats help make the Gulf Islands a haven for birds. Over 300 species have been observed here.
A black and white bird with the lower segment of its beak protruding.
The black skimmers and least terns in particular are remarkable studies of adapting to the harsh climes of the Gulf Islands. The skimmers' long orange beaks enable them to snatch fish from the sea. The terns weigh a little more than an ounce, yet are strong enough to migrate here from as far south as Brazil. Instead of nesting in trees, both skimmers and terns breed by building colonies in the soft sand. Can you spot the tern eggs?
2 beige speckled eggs rest in a depression among the pebbles and sand.
The remarkable web of life you see is only part of the picture. There's another world that exists here, an emerald wonderland below the water surface.
An octopus slinks by.
You know, a lot of our visitors don't realize that our park actually is 80% underwater.
Dark water contrasts with the sandy shoreline.
Those dark areas on the north side of the islands are seagrass beds, sanctuaries for the Gulf Islands' underwater creatures.
Riley Hoggard,
90% plus of all the commercially and recreationally imported fish spend some part of their life in the seagrass beds.
a sea turtle glides underwater above a bed of grass.
Nursery of the sea is the best description because they do harbor a lot of species that either come there to spawn, to reproduce, or they come there for cover. So it supports everything out there at some point or another.
Fiddler crabs move about on a mud flat.
And that's not the only nursery here. Another is located along the Mississippi coast. Bayous not only teem with life, they are key to sustaining life. If you'd like to experience a timeless marshland environment, look no further than Davis Bayou.
An egret wades in shallow water. Words appear, voice of Terry Wilde.
Here in the bayous, we actually have a mix of saltwater and freshwater. So the kind of water we have here is brackish. Sometimes it gets really salty. So you have to be able to tolerate a mix of both.
Marsh grasses are silhouetted against an orange sky.
That's what makes the salt marsh cordgrass so amazing. It survives by taking fresh water in while keeping salt water out. As the sea oats anchor the Gulf's islands, the cordgrass anchors the bayou, providing a home for birds like the green-backed heron and crustaceans like the fiddler crab.
A crab has one small claw and one immense claw.
They survive by burying themselves in the mud for protection. At low tide, they emerge.
Dozens of fiddler crabs walk from a stand of tall grass onto a mud flat.
The fiddler crabs and other creatures of the bayou feed on a nutrient soup made of dead and decaying grasses and organisms.
These special salt marsh grasses, they grow up, they die, they break down, they form nutrients. Those get released back into the bayou system. Plants and animals eat those nutrients. So I would say that the bayou is part of that whole cycle, kind of completes the picture of the National Seashore.
A man aims a camera. 3 dolphins swim off the bow of a boat.
To study this complete picture, the Park Service often partners with other government agencies. The Mississippi Sound has one of the largest populations of bottlenose dolphins anywhere.
A dolphin leaps completely out of the water.
Scientists from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration identify the dolphins by taking photos of their dorsal fins. Like a fingerprint, each fin is unique to the individual.
Scratches, nicks, and gouges scar the dolphin's dorsal fins.
Monitoring the dolphin population helps scientists gauge the overall health of the marine ecosystem.
Dolphins swim in the Gulf, 2 moving side by side, surface to reveal their dark gray dorsal fins. A barrier island stretches to the horizon.
Of course, it was only a matter of time before humans would leave their footprints on these islands. They may look untouched, but in reality, the Mississippi Islands have been frequented for centuries by American Indians, the French, Spanish, British, even pirates.
A small green island is split by a long, narrow bay.
Would you believe that Cat Island, the westernmost of the Gulf Islands, was named after raccoons? And during World War II went completely to the dogs?
Words appear. U.S. Army drafts dogs for war.
Let me explain.
For the first time in United States history, the Army officially inducts dogs for war.
Because its terrain and climate was similar to that in the South Pacific, the U.S. Army established the Cat Island War Dog Reception and Training Center.
Gail Bishop.
About 400 dogs of different breeds were brought out to Cat Island to this dog training facility.
Rusted machinery sits on a foundation.
Today, all that's left of the World War II dog training camp are just the remnants, the foundations of the buildings that were here, and also an old generator that was used to generate electricity.
5 miles to the east of Cat Island is West Ship Island, site of historic Fort Massachusetts. Ship Island has been true to its name.
A fortress sits near the shoreline of a long, narrow barrier island.
Its deep harbor and strategic location near New Orleans made it an important place for Americans to defend.
A photograph of a man in dress coat and tie with wavy hair and a goatee.
In 1855, Jefferson Davis, then U.S. Secretary of War, urged the building of a defense on Ship Island. 4 years later, in March 1859, construction of a third system fort began. It was later called Fort Massachusetts, named after a Union gunboat that fired on Confederate soldiers occupying the unfinished fort. Later, to complete the fort, red bricks were shipped in from the Northeast.
A cannon is mounted on a turntable made of circular rails.
During the war, thousands of Union troops used Ship Island as a staging area. After the fall of New Orleans, the 2nd Regiment of Louisiana Native Guards garrisoned the island. In April 1863, these African-American volunteers, some of whom were former slaves, raided Confederate defenses at Pascagoula, capturing the Confederate flag. The Native Guards' assignment on Ship Island was hard duty, the sort of work that commanders of white regiments avoided, if they could.
A photograph of an African-American soldier.
Hardship was nothing new to these men. Freedom was.
Dr. James Hollinsworth, Jr., historian.
They knew from the beginning that this war was about slavery. And they knew it because they saw the institution from the inside out. And therefore, the outcome of the war would have a direct impact on them. And they wanted to have a say-so in how it came out.
A photograph of African-American soldiers standing in formation. One soldier carries a drum, others hold rifles with bayonets. A cannon points over open water.
A year after the Civil War ended, Congress cut off funding to complete the fort because its masonry walls could not withstand the force of rifled guns. For the next century, Fort Massachusetts would sit abandoned.
In a photograph, water reaches the fortress walls.
With its very survival at stake, some concerned citizens stepped in. In 1936, a group of Gulfport veterans bought the island property and crumbling fort from the government, with the hope of turning it into a memorial.
In a photograph, a crowd stands inside the fortress.
Tourism, they said, would bring Fort Massachusetts back to life.
People stand around a cannon.
Instead of hauling shrimp, the Skermetta family began hauling passengers from the Mississippi coast to and from Ship Island. Movie starlet Jane Mansfield even got in on the action.
Mansfield poses.
But even the best intentions could not stop Fort Massachusetts from being slowly swallowed by the Gulf.
A poster contains the words, "Help save the fort."
In the 1970s, citizens rallied to save the fort. Then the National Park Service stepped in, replenishing the beaches around the fort and restoring it to its Civil War-era glory.
People stroll on a boardwalk.
Today, Fort Massachusetts continues to draw tourists from the mainland. The old fort and sparkling sand beaches provide a welcome respite on a barrier island.
A pier on a calm gulf. Small boats lie at anchor near the beach. A thin barrier island stretches toward the horizon.
12 miles to the east of Fort Massachusetts is what many consider to be the crown jewel of the Gulf Islands. At Horn Island, the wonder, wildness, and diversity of the Gulf Islands converge into a shimmering brilliance.
Words appear. April Newland, author, Horn of Plenty.
Horn Island, for me, brings together so many facets of the Gulf Coast all in one place. You have lagoons and ponds. You have maritime forests. There are dunes and relic dunes and marsh and meadow. Horn Island is very special. It really brings together many, many different things in one place.
Dark clouds hover over a beach.
Like the other Gulf Islands, this island has a history of being touched by man. Yet Horn is best known because of a man touched by it.
Mary Anderson Pickard.
My father was Walter Anderson. He had no choice at all. He had to paint. And on Horn Island, he was able to fulfill the gifts that he had and be absolutely happy, I think.
Walter Anderson's watercolors brought the kaleidoscope of Horn Island into focus.
A watercolor painting of two butterflies perched on yellow flowers.
I think that my father was extraordinarily aware of pattern. Of course, he was a colorist. He was a marvelous colorist. But he was also more aware than most people are of minute patterns and patterns in the environment. And he felt that in recording those patterns, he was giving some kind of order to the universe as he saw it.
Anderson's paintings were instrumental to Horn Island being designated a wilderness area in 1978. The island Walter Anderson brought to the world would be federally protected and preserved as the wild place he cherished.
A watercolor portrait of a man wearing a hat.
Walter Anderson died in 1965, but not before getting to witness nature at its most powerful. That year, he hunkered down on Horn Island and rode out Hurricane Betsy.
Satellite images of Hurricanes Ivan, Dennis, Katrina, and Rita.
It's hard to talk about the Gulf Islands without bringing up hurricanes. As the forts were built to protect us from military dangers, the Gulf Islands help buffer us from natural ones. Hurricanes can be catastrophic to humans, but these storms are an important natural process that helps shape the Gulf Islands.
Voice of Riley Hoggard.
If you don't have the hurricanes, the barrier islands don't replenish themselves, they don't reconfigure themselves, they don't rejuvenate themselves. But to help them survive, they're absolutely critical.
A tree is silhouetted against an orange sky.
By withstanding nature's most powerful and lethal forces, these barrier islands provide protection for the mainland.
From above, an island with a narrow beach.
They serve as first defense to those of us living on the mainland, and they take the brunt of the storms, the high seas, the winds.
Grasses and shrubs cover the island's interior.
They're silent and always there, like protectors, but they're strong. They'll hold in there. They give you so much.
To preserve these barrier islands, Congress created Gulf Islands National Seashore in 1971. That single act helps keep these sparkling white sand beaches healthy and undeveloped. It maintains that these brick and mortar symbols of the freedoms we so cherish continue to stand tall and proud. And it ensures that these emerald waters remain clear and clean.
A woman and boy frolic in the surf.
There are places that we should protect. We tend to think of the barriers as protecting us, but really now we mainlanders need to protect the barriers.
Protecting the barriers means treading lightly, leaving these fragile islands as you found them.
A hatchling sea turtle emerges and pushes forward through the white sand.
If there is a symbol of survival at the Gulf Islands, it's the loggerhead sea turtle. With a lot of luck, these 2-inch-long hatchlings will grow to be 300-pound adults.
Turtles crawl toward the surf.
But the odds are stacked against them.
They tumble over the edge of a small embankment.
Just one of every 1,000 will live to be an adult.
A wave washes over the turtles, pulling them toward the water.
For now, we can hope that those odds are enough to ensure that the loggerheads and other threatened species of sea turtles will continue. And if these hatchlings do indeed survive, they will return as adults and most likely lay eggs on this same beach.
An adult turtle swims through the water. On the beach, a hatchling crawls toward the surf.
Such are the rhythms and the wonders of the Gulf Islands.
A wave overtakes the hatchling turtle. The surf churns against the beach at twilight. Film credits begin to roll. On a sunny day, a barrier island surrounded by endless blue water is approached from the air. The island is outlined by a narrow white beach. Fort Massachusetts, red brick in color, sits at the water's edge. Its thick walls are topped with green growth. Adjacent to the fortress, a path transects the island and terminates in a pier that extends into the Gulf. The island's interior is covered with vegetation and inland ponds. An alligator lies motionless in murky water, its nostrils, eyes, and head above the surface. The alligator closes its eyes. Water courses through a shallow sandy channel. Near the horizon, trees stand tall against the dark cloudy sky. On an island, dark blue inland waters are linked to the Gulf by narrow channels. Turquoise waters churn white with foam as they wash upon the shore. Dark clouds loom above, parting slightly at the horizon to reveal a patch of sunlight. Words appear, Great Divide Pictures. Above the words are an illustration of snow-covered mountains. More words appear, presented by National Park Service, U.S. Department of the Interior, all rights reserved.